Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Cantatori, and I'm head of culture and engagement for WRMC. Now, also joining me tonight is Jack Thuet. He is our vice president of business development. Say hello to everybody, Jack.
Hello, everybody.
Awesome. So I'm excited to welcome you all tonight to our April Speaker Series event. If this is your first time joining us, we are glad to have you. Welcome. So these exclusive events, just so those are new understand, these exclusive events are designed to bring industry-leading experts to the forefront, which offers valuable insights, best practices, and an opportunity for you to ask questions. Our speakers are carefully selected for their understanding of the unique challenges and opportunities association boards and managers face. Before we dive in, I want to mention that we are recording this session. It will be available to all of our board members and managers, along with other webinars in this series. Our goal is to ensure that every board member has the resources they need to lead their communities effectively. That brings us to tonight's event, high-rise construction claims and legal considerations. I just kind of summarized that for you. Joining me is Cass McKenzie, managing partner with McKenzie Mena LLP. Cass, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, Nicole. Thank you for having us tonight.
Of course. So the format will be similar to our previous events. Cass will present and we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to send those questions via the chat and Jack or myself will make sure that we address those during the Q&A portion. So with that, Cass, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening to everybody. It's great to see the names of some old friends and a lot of people that I don't know. So we're really excited to be here. We appreciate the opportunity. We love Worth Ross. We love this company and we love providing education on this subject. So that being said, I am going to bring up a PowerPoint that we'll use kind of a platform tonight to go through everything. So let me do that right now. And that open. There we go. Can Nicole, can you guys all see that okay?
Absolutely, it's
All right.
perfect.
Fantastic. All right. So just quickly, as I said, my name is Cass McKenzie. I am the managing partner of McKenzie Mena. Our firm is a boutique firm. We only represent properties and associations and owners who have construction issues with their properties. I've been doing this now for 27 years, both in Colorado and Texas and other places, and have fairly versed in the area. We're going to focus tonight on high rises. And the reason that we're kind of doing that is over about the last 10 years, we've seen a great increase in our portfolio of cases on vertical construction. And that's basically because there is so much vertical construction now in places like Austin and Denver, in Dallas, and even in Houston. I mean, there's just an expanse of vertical construction that has happened very quickly. And that has brought kind of a plethora of problems. So tonight, I'm going to cover a lot of information. I'm going to try to do this judiciously and efficiently, but I'm trying to give you as much as I possibly can, probably from a little bit of a high level view, just so we can get it all in. I'm going to talk about the process, what a claim is and what it's not, talk a little bit about some of the legal documents, and then we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about case studies themselves, the kind of cases that we've seen. We're doing this more for to kind of alert people that are dealing with vertical construction, managing vertical constructions on the boards for vertical constructions that, hey, these may be some things that you want to kind of pay attention to or watch out for in your building. As Nicole said, we'll get through this. We'll have a question and answer series, and then we'll kind of go from there. But really excited to be here. So let's go ahead and jump in. So let's start with the basics. What is a defect? Do you have a claim? The reason I kind of frame it this way is a lot of times boards or developers are presenting a narrative that when you're having problems, look, that is maintenance. That's a maintenance item. So it's not a warranty claim or whatever else, and you need to take care of it. So let's just start with the basic definitions. Maintenance, as you can understand and expect, is just preventive maintenance to ensure that systems operate smoothly and efficiently, and the physical condition of the building does not deteriorate. And it's exactly what you would think it would be on its face. We need to maintain our HVAC systems. We got to change filters. We need to maintain our electrical systems. We need to maintain our water systems, those kind of things. Anything, that the product manufacturer says, look, for the efficient operation of this product, you need to do this type of maintenance. So that's what everybody's basic understanding of maintenance is. But then I'm going to expand on that a little bit because there are some items that may not be considered normal maintenance for a product, but are kind of categorized as maintenance because of the nature of the failure. So before that, let's talk about what a construction defect is. A construction defect is the failure to install or design a product in accordance with the industry standards for which it should be installed. And that basically is a failure to comply with the code, failure to install according to the plans and specifications, failure to install according to manufacturer's installation specifications, or some basically industry standards. Now, the reason I bring that up is you may have things that aren't normal product maintenance according to the manufacturer, but maybe not rising to the level of a construction defect for which you want to present a claim. And I've got a real rudimentary example here. Elevated patio, here's the patio wall. Somebody put the stone in, they didn't set it right, it started to separate. And is it a construction defect? Probably. They didn't do it right. Is it something that you would want to just file a claim over? If it's one stone, no. This, I think, is a definition of normal maintenance, which I can kind of understand. And the reason I bring that up is, look, there's no way to build these buildings and not screw one thing up. You may, a contractor will have a bad day, right? They're going to miss something. They're going to miss a piece of flashing. They're going to piece of stone is not going to go in right. And that's going to happen. And I can understand the narrative that this may be maintenance, but it's when the maintenance goes from one isolated or two isolated incidents into systemic problems. So this is a building up in Tyler that I represented about 10 years ago. And when the stone started falling off the building, the builder's response to this is, well, that's maintenance. Stones are going to fall off. You need to reattach them, put them back on. Okay, one stone falls off. Okay, I get that. Maybe even two. But when you start having systemic problems throughout the building, now we're moving out of the definition of maintenance and truly into a construction defect, because a systemic failure of a product or a system is not maintenance. Systemic failure is a bad methodology of construction. Here, the construction was not adhered, or the stone was not adhered in accordance with the product manufacturer's installation specifications. As managers and board members, this is when your red flag should go up. And I think most people would understand that. But let me just tell you why I use this example. Nobody wants to believe that they have problems with their buildings. Owners don't want to believe that they bought a building and it's defective. And I get that. I've had construction problems with my own building or my own house. But when these things start to occur, you're under very tight timing limitations, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And so you have to kind of start thinking about, look, this isn't maintenance. This is something that we're having to deal with on a daily basis. And as a way of an example, when I got called on in this case, this had been going on for a year and a half. They had to put barriers over the egresses and ingresses for this building to protect owners from walking in and stones falling on their head. And so it took a while for them to switch on and go, you know what, I don't think this is a maintenance item anymore. So the kind of one of the purposes tonight is to kind of implant that way of thinking in your guys' thought process about, is this really maintenance? Is it a construction defect? And if it is, what are we going to do about it? So let's talk about the timing limitations. There's a lot of slides we're going to go through tonight. I always emphasize this. If you remember one slide, remember this one, because this is the one that's most important. Every state, including Texas, including Colorado, have timing limitations on when you can bring these claims. If you do not bring the claim in accordance with these timing limitations, you waive it. I don't care if how bad it is, how much money it's going to cost, how egregious the failure is. You have to file the claim within accordance with the timing limitations. And it doesn't matter if you didn't know what the cause of it was. You weren't sure how extensive it was. None of that matters. All that matters is that if you file a claim, it's done. And this doesn't have anything to do with your warranty. Your warranty is a warranty claim on all to its own. This is the law in the state. So what's your outside window? In Texas, it's 10 years for condos, for elevated condos. You have 10 years from the date of substantial completion. In Colorado, you have 6 years, a much shorter and timer or a shorter time limitation, and it comes up really quickly. In Colorado, you maybe get another year or two if you file it and find the defect in 5-6. But that's your outside window from the date of substantial completion. And when is that? That's typically when the CO is issued. So think about that. COs are issued. We stay in declarant control for a few years. This clock is still running. Declarant control does not toll the statute of repose. So outside limitation, 10 or 6 years, depending on your state. Both states then have what is called a statute of limitations. And that states that within that outside window, once you become aware of a problem, or you should have become aware of a problem, you only have 2 years to bring the claim for that problem. And this is probably the most difficult conversation I have to have when I get called on cases for people that have let these kind of lapse. I'll go out, the problems are bad, they're egregious, you can see them. So how long has this been going on? Oh, it's been going on for years. That's a tough conversation to have. Now, I don't think that managers or board members should try to figure out whether this statute has run or how much time we have left. That's not what I'm saying. I think it's very important for you to be cognizant that they exist, because everybody gets kind of caught up in the warranties and how long those takes or whatever, and they don't really focus on what the property code says in both states, which is, look, this is your time. And if you don't get it done in this time, then you buy the claim. On the 2 years, there's a couple things to think about. When does that knowledge of when the 2 years is going to start to run? The law is basically this. If you act like something's wrong, then you knew something was wrong. And again, it doesn't matter how bad it is, what the root cause of it is. But if you acted or did something that would indicate to a normal person that something was wrong, then you knew it was wrong. Community association manager sends a letter to the builder. Hey, we have a problem. Definitely going to start the statute. Engineering reports, transition studies, reserve studies. Hey, you have a problem. Definitely going to start the time limit running. Continued problems. You're repairing things over and over again. Board attempting to address the issues with the builder. All those things are going to start that 2-year statute from running. So again, don't try to figure out when it's going to run or anything on your own. A lot of you have general counsel, or reach out to somebody else and say, hey, look, we have an issue. I want to make sure we're within our time limitations. Just can you look at this for us? Because this is probably the biggest thing you have to deal with some of these claims directly. Okay. Let's say that you unfortunately have a problem. What do? What is the process? Every state has what's called a statutory pre-litigation procedure. The purpose of that is to try to get the parties to sit down, work it out without ever going into formal litigation. And this is something, again, that I think a lot of boards and a lot of property owners kind of don't grasp. They don't want to call the attorney because, oh, we're just going to end up in a lawsuit. That's not the way it works. you don't go right into a lawsuit. You have to go through these procedures to try to work out the claim. And each state has a different name for them and some different nuances, but they basically mirror themselves. One, you start with putting the builder on notice. Hey, we have a problem. Now, here's the great news. By putting the builder on notice in Colorado and in Texas, that immediately stops the limitations period from running. This is something I worked in the Colorado legislature and the Texas legislature to get invoked. It used to be that you actually had to go out and file a lawsuit to get the limitations period to run. But now, because we have these very complicated pre-litigation procedures, all you have to do is send out the notice. So again, great backstop. Love for you guys to come in and work on fixing the claim for us, builder. We're going to put you on notice of the claim because we're going to stop that limitations period from running. Then the process is pretty straightforward. You have to go out in any state and have an engineer inspect and test, come up with a report. Here's all of our problems. Here's where they exist. Here's why they exist. And here's what we think needs to be done to fix them. Then you serve that on the builder, and then the builder is allowed to offer a repair or settlement. Honestly, that doesn't happen much. And to the extent they offer something, it's typically a Band-Aid fix. But there are instances where I've had builders step in and go, look, we want to fix this. We don't want to go in litigation. So let's figure out how to do that. Great. Then we can kind of step outside the litigation procedure and figure out a repair process or a settlement process that's going to work. But if it doesn't work, if there is no resolution, it's only then that you move into formal litigation. And that can either be an arbitration or court. Now, look, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I would eat up all the time talking about the nuances of both. Arbitration is a private proceeding. Court is in the public courthouse. Just know this, the majority of your projects are going to be subject to binding arbitration pursuant to your governing documents. There are very few projects out there that don't invoke the arbitration proceeding. Builders don't want to be in court, so that's usually where you meet. Okay, so you didn't get a settlement, you didn't get a resolution. Now, here's the thing I like about both of them. In either Colorado or Texas, before you ever move into formal litigation, you have to have a special meeting with the owners, and they have to vote to approve the action of filing a lawsuit. Great, great provision. Why? It's a pain to get it, but it galvanizes the association. Now it's not, hey, board, why did you go out and file this big lawsuit that we're all subject to now? What are you doing? Everybody has to get together. Everybody votes. Our law firm runs that vote. We organize it. We put it together. Typically, it's a majority. All you need is a 51% approval. We come in and we just lay it out to the owners. Here are the problems. Here are the engineering reports. Here's what needs to be done. Here was the builder's offer. Here's why that's insufficient. Now, you have two choices. You can go out and protect your legal rights, or you can pay for this yourself. And I think once the owners hear that, they hear exactly the same thing the board is. They're behind the owners 100%. I'll tell you this, we've never not gotten a vote in any of our cases once we laid it out for the owners. But that's the process. Pretty simple, but can be complex. You need to organize it. You need to do it correctly. And it's one of the things I'm going to talk about getting guidance and counsel early on, because you don't want to try to navigate these waters on your own. Here's the mud that gets in everybody's water, the governing documents. The latest trend by builders has been writing their own pre-litigation processes into the governing documents. You have to do not just the reporting that's required by statute, but you have to do all this additional things. You have to report in this way. Let me just say right out of the gate, I don't think half of this is legal. I think it's put in there, and I call it kind of a litigation deterrent. They want people to read it and go, it's so difficult to get through this. I don't even think I want to move forward with the claim. But from our standpoint, we come in, we look at the governing documents, we organize the pre-litigation claim, and we do all of this simultaneously with the pre-litigation statutory procedures. Why do I do that? I just want to take the argument off the table. Fine. You want me to do a more detailed report? I don't care. I can do that. You want me to have a second vote? Okay, fine. You want me to get 67% as opposed to 50%? Okay, fine. I've never not gotten the vote. Um, they'll put things in about additional dispute resolution. They'll write in these big flowery statements about how you really need to think about litigation because it could really be detrimental for you. All of these things are trying to deter you from moving forward with the claim. So some examples, 67, I've seen where you have to have a 67% vote to go out and just hire a lawyer, which is not a requirement on any other kind of entity in any state. Um, Engineer has to hand deliver documents. You can't hire an engineer outside the county where the project is located. I mean, some of it just gets, I'm waiting for the one that says you have to sacrifice your first child before you can actually file a claim. But again, we read these, we read them up front, we organize them, we do them at the same time as we do the pre-litigation processes, and we just comply with most of them. So there's no argument. What the builder wants to do is say, well, wait a minute, they didn't comply with the governing documents. So let's talk about that, not about how bad the defects is. I want to take that argument off the table. So we go through, we comply with the governing documents to the extent that they're actually compliable. I mean, some of them are just so ridiculous, we don't even pay attention to them. But for the majority of them, we go through and we'll comply with the governing document procedures. And then we get to the end of that process. So governing documents are a big deal. Other legal document considerations that I think are just important to think about. Electronic communications. Before you get counsel involved, you're talking to the builder. Hey, we have these problems. This is what we think. What do you think? Be very careful what you put in emails. When you send it out, it's out there. These problems have been going on for 6 months, or we think this, or we think that. So once we get involved, we really stop the electronic communications directly with the builder. All communications go through us, but you have to be cognizant of what you're putting in your electronic communications. And I know this is true for every other aspect of your building, but especially when you're talking about potential litigation. Warranties, do you have them? Can you use them? Absolutely. Nothing about this process changes your warranty claims. You can file a warranty claim. Warranty claims will survive. You can still move forward with warranty claims during the process to the extent that you want to do that. So it doesn't negate the warranty, just that when we file these claims, we're not going through the warranty procedure. The warranty procedure has its own rules, limitations. If you're going to make a warranty claim, you're subject to the warranty contract. We're not doing that. We're filing the claims under common law. So warranties are still there. You still can use them. Transition releases. I've seen this a lot of time when declarant control ends, the builder comes in and says, okay, now we're going to transition. We want you to accept the property. Or we want you to give us a release. We want you to walk the project with us and release that. No, none of that's required by transition or declarant control, and none of it should be done. You need to kind of, if any of that ever comes up, immediately go to your counsel, general counsel, or whoever, and talk about that. Finally, plans and manufacturer installation instructions, especially in the big vertical buildings, you want those. They're going to be really necessary for your engineer to kind of make the building function, make sure you're doing the proper maintenance to the extent that it has to be done. But if you have a claim, knowing the as-bills, where everything is located, what the manufacturer actually says is invaluable. So at transition, request those documents. Try to get them up front. Make sure that you have them. All just things to think about as you move forward. So, talked about kind of the overview on the legal process, talked about the governing documents. Now let's kind of dig in to the case studies on high rises. And look, every high rise is different. They're all have their own challenges. They all have their own nuances that you have to kind of deal with. But what we're going to talk about tonight are actual cases that we have handled that we see patterns of behavior, patterns of failure. And so again, all of this is really to just kind of plant a red flag in your mind that, hey, look, yeah, we have that product. Maybe we should have it checked out and make sure it's okay. So because a lot of times these are buried, they're not open and obvious, and you may not have failed yet, right? So you want to kind of get out in front of these as much as you possibly can. So the growth in this vertical construction kind of creates a lot of challenges. And the first is just the logistics of a high-rise repair. When you have problems, you have to think about access. You have to think about interior or exterior finishes. You have to think about how is this work going to be staged? How's the site going to be set up? How are the protections going to be put in place? What are the construction costs associated with repairing something in a high rise, a 50-story building, as opposed to the construction cost when like your typical stick building construction where you can just drive right up and unload the materials in the front yard and work right from there. How are you going to get there? Um, what kind of contractor are you going to have to use? Contractors who work on high rises are at a different level and quality, or should be, than contractors who work on stick building construction. So that all of these things are things that you need to be building into your damage model, be thinking about as you kind of go through these, and kind of be ready to deal with. Like I said, every building is different. Some have really easy access, some have very difficult access. Some have a lot of space where you can load and stage and do the work. Some don't. Some defects are on the exterior of the building, and you've got to figure out how you're going to get to it. Typically, it's going to be a man drop. Where are you going to store all the materials? What's it going to mean to the owners? Um, all of those things are things that have to be dealt with during the claim process itself. So you're properly organizing the damage model to get the kind of money that you need to make the association whole at the end of the day. So just things to kind of think about as you go through. Exterior finishes are probably the biggest one, or interior finishes, excuse me. I mean, whether it be common areas or interior, high-end interior finishes. I mean, if you have problems that are behind these walls, and you're going to have to cut into those walls or ceilings, how are you going to fix that? So all of those things you kind of need to kind of go through, think about, organize, make sure they're part of your damage model. So what are some of the things that we have seen as we kind of go through these cases? And I think the biggest one right now is probably mechanical, plumbing and installation and product of certain water lines, HVAC lines, and then the biggest one right now is probably the FSS, the fire suppression lines. So as you can imagine, with these buildings, you're pumping a lot of water, electricity, coolant, everything up and down the buildings, and there's really large expanses of vertical runs of piping. And that piping has to be installed a very certain way to handle the weight and capacity of the building itself. So what we have noticed a lot is that the support systems for the piping is just simply not up to commercial grade. The pipes are too heavy for the supports that are installed. Um, they fail, they push the pipes away. This is a copper pipe, it's a refrigerant pipe. It's carrying cooling, which I'm going to talk about in a minute for HVAC systems. The problem was they just kind of came up with their own support strut system. This wasn't designed. It wasn't the way it was supposed to be installed. The weight of the pipe is now pulling the support away from the wall, is separated. The pipe now is starting to sag. So first of all, you're going to have functionality problems with the system itself, but then eventually you're going to have failure of the pipe. And this is not uncommon, whether it be copper vertical piping or steel horizontal piping. Again, same thing. The support system there on the wall is not sufficient to support the weight of the pipe. You can see how it's bending and pulling away. The pipe is starting to bend of itself. And so this is something that we're seeing kind of over and over again, is that the pipe contractor, whether it be HVAC, plumber, or whatever, is really kind of not following a good design build in installing the installation of the pipes. And it's one of the bigger claims we've seen. There's no easy way to fix this, especially if the pipe bends, because now you're talking about having to pull it out and put in new pipe. And that's true with a lot of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. It's one thing to fix something that's open and easy to get to, but when you have to deconstruct it, take out the defective material, and then put back what is going to be the proper material, that takes a lot of work and can affect, it can affect um, the livability of the units. Sometimes owners have to be displaced to do that. It'd have to shut down HVAC, especially in Texas. That's really a difficult thing. So all of these things are just considerations have to be had. Again, this is another vertical piping run in another building where, again, the weight of the pipe is so heavy that the support system, the strut system, is not sufficient to hold it. So you can see, and this building is not that old; it's under 5 years. The piping is already pulling the struts away from the building itself. So this is just one of our bigger concerns, and something that your building engineers can look for, even if you haven't had failure yet. You want to definitely keep an eye on your vertical runs of your pipes. Other issues with piping is flanges. Are they properly sealed? Are they letting water escape from the pipe itself here? This flange was not properly installed, wasn't sealed. So we had water escaping from the flange and now it's starting to corrode the flange itself and is eventually going to make the flange fail. Um, Insulation. Um, Insulation is a really difficult thing to do right. It wouldn't seem like that it is, but it is. Here, this is foam insulation. Again, it's around copper piping, and it simply shouldn't have been installed this way. And what is happening now is because it's wrapping the copper pipe, it's causing it to condensate inside the insulation. So you can see there on the right, when we pulled the insulation off, water is just running out of the insulation. So there's a number of things that can be happening here. A lot of times you can see with the quality of work when you walk up to this insulation and you see how it's split and kind of opened up and cracking. You're like, is that the way it should be? But the bigger thing is really having an engineer or an expert, a mechanical, an MEP come in and say, look, with copper piping, you can't do that. Or with these vertical runs, you can't support them that way. Um, those are the things that we all we bring to the table, obviously, when we do these cases. But when you're looking at your buildings, if you're not having problems, sometimes it's good to just have these systems checked out. And these are the kind of things that you want to be looking for. All right. Probably the biggest issue we've had in the last 5 years is this FSS CPVC. So CPVC is a plastic, almost a PVC type product, and it's being used a lot for fire suppression systems. It's being used for other kind of waterline systems, but primarily for fire suppression systems. Fire suppression systems always used to be steel. That's the way they were put in because it's probably one of your most important systems in the building for the natural reason that it protects your health and safety of your residents. But the CPVC product was developed. It's cheaper. It's easier to put in because it's not so rigid. It's easy to maintain, although it doesn't have the lifespan of steel. Um, and it is a product. If your high rise is, anything above 4 or 5 floors and is built in the last 5 years, you probably have this product. And it's not on its face a bad product. Um, Builders are putting it in because of the cost value they save, which raises their profit margin. But it's not a terrible product, but you have to put it in like anything else correctly. And the problem with CPVC is this: it is highly reactive when it comes into contact with non-compatible materials. And what do I mean by that? And typically it's sealants or caulks. So you have fire caulking when anytime it goes through a penetration, or you have acoustical caulking when there's penetrations. There is a very, very limited type of sealants that you can use on these pipes. They're published. The manufacturer publishes specific things. In fact, most fire installers have to go to the manufacturer and have the products cleared, which begs the question, how could they possibly still put the incompatible materials on there? But they do. And a lot of times it's because the fire installer may get cleared for one product, but then you've got an acoustical caulking guy, a drywall guy, somebody else that comes back, and they come in and they can put absolutely the wrong product on. The problem with it is this. And wait, let me before I get there. that's not the only thing. These low voltage cable wiring, that is also highly contaminated or a highly reactive product with the CPVC. They have plasticizers in the plastic coating. Those things will leach off of the coating and they'll leach onto the pipe. And you can see they're here on the right. That's that pipe that cable was pressed up against. And you can see the little brown mark where the chemical reaction, it's called environmental stress cracking. It basically starts to melt the pipe. And it's already occurring. So it's not only just the sealants, it's the cables. And the problem with it is the sealants, you can pretty much identify where they are because they're usually at penetration. So it's kind of easy to test it. The cabling, there's no telling. There's no as-built about where the cabling is run. It's just run all over the place. And so now you're kind of left with this process of trying to go on an Easter egg hunt to figure out where the cables actually are. So all things that have to be investigated and done strategically during the course of the claim, but really big claims because when they happen, I don't know what happened in my other picture, but they start this environmental stress cracking, which starts to melt the pipe. And then the pipe starts to break because it's loaded with high pressurized water for the fire suppression system. And then when the breaks do occur, in a high-rise building, anytime you have any kind of a water leak or water break, especially if you don't have leak detection or something like that, you can have big problems really quick because the water is going to start leaking down into the units. Oh, there's my other picture. So that's what happens when the pipe starts to deteriorate. The thing about this is it's not like, oh, will it maybe happen? It will happen. It's just a matter of when. And there's no timetable. It depends on a lot of things, the temperature, the type of product that's on, how much product's on there. But it eventually will cause the product to fail. And the only way to fix it is to take it out and go back either with clean CPVC or go back with steel. And then when they do break, fortunately, this is a very standard finish unit. When the breaks do occur, you have all kinds of water damage. Drywall, ceilings, walls all have to be removed and replaced. Flooring will have to be removed and replaced. Um, the extent of the breaks, aside from the health and safety issue that is associated with it, the extent of the breaks it can be really bad, especially, heaven forbid, the breaks occur or the repairs have to occur where you have really high-end finishes. I mean, when you cut into that, how do you fix that? I mean, some of these finishes were very customized. It's just hard to go out and find them again. All right. Moving off of the mechanical systems there a little bit, fire stopping, as I talked about, just making sure the fire stopping at rated partitions is correct. We see this a lot where your gaps are left, and now we've compromised the ability for the building to kind of suppress fire. This is another thing we see a lot in our buildings. VRF system. So this is a HVA system, variable refrigerant flow system, heating and air conditioning system that uses heat pumps. It doesn't have ductwork. Multiple individual units can be run by a single rooftop unit. There's a lot of good things about it. Problem is it's really, really complicated. You have one condensing unit. It sends all of the coolants to the distribution box, and then the distribution box will distribute those amongst the various units. It's just really complicated. It has to be balanced right. The pipes have to be in right. And this is something going back to the mechanical piping I talked about before. If your piping is not installed correctly and you're starting to get failures of the pipe, here's a building that we represented where the piping was bending. So what was happening is not enough refrigerant, lubrication, and coolant was getting back to the compressors. So they couldn't cool themselves. And so you had units that couldn't get below 80 degrees or 76 degrees. And in the summertime in Texas, that's detrimental. So it will start to affect the system itself. And the system will start, and if you have bellies in the lines as well, this can affect, again, the flow of the piping. And then you're starting to have compressor failure where the compressors start burning out because the lubricant's not properly getting back into the compressors and they start building out. VRFs are popular now. A lot of people are using them. Some people are starting to get away from them just because of the complexities with making them work. But they're out there. They can work. They can be corrected if the piping is fixed, the balancing is correct. It can take a lot of work to get them back into line. They can work, but they can come with a lot of problems as well. Just some other things to kind of go through that we see elevated pools. Everybody has a lot of elevated pools now. They enhance the property value. They're really cool. They're beautiful. They're a great amenity to have at your buildings. And so that's all fine and good. But if you start having problems with them, again, the logistics of getting that done can become a bit laborious. Here is a building that had an elevated pool. I think this was on the 8th floor. It was an infinity pool. On the left there, you can see a little drain at the bottom of the stairs, but that drain's really just for water that's splashing over the top. That's not what was occurring. If you can see at the bottom, the sealant of the glass partition wall wasn't properly sealed, so water was just flowing out of the pool. Not only was this causing an excessive amount of water loss for the building and running a lot of costs, but then it started migrating into the concrete. So you see cracking on the stairs. On the right side, you can see of the actual podium deck, the water was cascading over and getting into the concrete, which started having the concrete to spall and fail. At the bottom there, you can see where the water stain is. We actually had at this building a piece of concrete spalled and fell off, fell all the way to the floor at 8 floors. So again, not a huge fix for the pool itself, but a huge fix to get to the pool, deal with the pool, address the pool based on where it was in the building. Here's another building that we represented that was having the same thing, water management issues. The pool, the tub itself was not sealed properly, so we had water migrating from the pool into the decking. You can see on the right where it's all distorted and we had erosion occurring under the decking. Decking started lifting up. Again, was really challenging to fix, not from the aspect of the repair itself, but all of the complexities that came with it of getting materials up to the fourth. This is a 4th floor pool, getting them up there, using the building elevators, trying to figure out where to do all the site work. All those things kind of came in, but elevated pools are something that we see a lot of problems with nowadays. Elevated decks. This is an amenity deck, a social place to go out and kind of hang out. Great, beautiful, really good for the project itself, but it didn't have any drainage. So every time it rained, it kind of turned into a bathtub. This is not maintenance. This is a construction defect. And so elevated pools and decks are a place where we see another kind of, not going to say a plethora, but we're seeing a kind of theme of problems that occur in those areas. Really quickly, rooftop mechanical. This is a mechanical HVAC system that went with your typical condenser type of system as opposed to VRF. But it's not really commercial grade, is it? Right? I mean, we put them up on kind of railroad tie sticks that weren't level. We have balancing issues. We have problems with damage to the rooftop deck, the operational function of the mechanical system. So rooftop mechanical systems is another area where we're seeing problems. Or you may have a more commercial grade for your rooftop mechanical systems. But again, these put too close together. We don't have enough space to properly ventilate and cool. And then once you get up there, once these are in, trying to fix them, separate them, can become a really big problem. And then just roof decking itself. EPDM is a great product, but if water's allowed to stand on it because it doesn't have proper drainage, because the roof's not properly sloped to the drains, we get pools of water that stay on the roof decking, and then the UV rays from the sun start breaking down the product. Just another area that we're seeing a lot of issues with. This one's kind of a one-off, but I think it highlights something that's really interesting. This is a high-rise I represented in Padre Island, which obviously is a very corrosive environment. A lot of exterior steel in the building. Manufacturer said, okay, corrosive environment, you need a 4-coat paint system to protect from all the salt in the air, but it was cheaper to go with a 3-coat system. And somebody told them that a 3-coat system would work, but clearly it does not. So again, we had to go up there and everything had to be scraped off because of the size and nature of the building. Again, logistically getting that work done was a real challenge. Just water management issues quickly. Exterior claddings of buildings will have water management problems. It doesn't happen as much, but it does happen. Here's a project where water was getting behind the exterior cladding. It's a stucco type material, but it really wasn't stucco. And then aesthetically, it looks bad, but it has to be fixed. And it's not the aesthetic side of it that's a problem. It's when the water migrates behind the stucco system. Here's a different building that has the same kind of look to it. And yeah, it looks bad, but really the problem is what's going on behind the substrate. When the water gets to the steel substrate, we start getting rust, structural problems that are associated with that. And so fixing that, taking all of that exterior cladding off, getting to it is just a challenge amongst itself. So you want to do that, look at it. And this happens, and I bring this up because, not every building is a giant high rise. Some of them are mid rises now, and mid rises go with, a more typical stick type construction. Here you've got some environmental issues you can see on the left. A lot of people think, oh, well, we're just going to power wash that off. But it's not the aesthetic outside of what it looks like that's the problem. It's what is happening to the substrate of the building when the water's penetrating behind it. And that's where the costs can get very, very, very expensive to fix. So almost done here. Underground parking garages are my last one. Underground parking garages, anytime you're having water management issues, either from above or from the outside containment of the underground parking garage itself, the water starts migrating in. Here it's getting on cars, it's into the concrete. Concrete's porous. It's like a sponge. It's going to suck it up. So a lot of people think, well, it's not that big of a deal, but eventually it becomes a big deal. The more the water comes in, the more it's going to start to deteriorate the concrete. On this picture on the left, the outside of that is dirt, and there was absolutely no waterproofing on the outside of that wall. So you had to dig out all of that dirt outside of it, re-put the waterproofing on, refix the cold joints. All of it's really expensive to take care of. And then other parking garage issues, you start just having structural failure. Here's one where the drives are starting to separate and obviously are causing very big concerns at the building. So that being said, that's a lot, right? If you're having things that you're concerned about, whether you call us, call somebody else, but we offer what's called an initial investigation. I'm going to answer questions here in just a minute, but it's free of charge. You can contact me. You can contact Jeff Higgins with my office. You can contact Chris in Texas. You can contact Amanda in Colorado. There's a toll-free number. If you just got questions, just give us a call. We're happy to answer them. We're happy to come out and look at your building and kind of help you dissect this thing a little bit. If you're going to have to go through this, you want to do it in an organized fashion. You want to be able to, from the beginning, have a clear definition of what your claims are, how you're going to proceed, present them to the builder in a very organized, expert-supported fashion. That is going to enhance your ability to resolve these things earlier and more successfully. So that being said, I'm going to turn it back over and ask for questions, and we'll go from there. All right. Let me just see how to do this real quick.
Yeah, so I think there was a question that popped up.
Okay.
So, Cass, that's a lot of information. That was awesome. It's a
Sorry.
great example. No, it's wonderful. I love that you went over everything in detail, but it's a great example of why it's so important not to cut corners, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think get out in front of them. The people that are the most successful boards in these things. Okay, did that stop the sharing?
Yes, you're no
Perfect.
longer
Great.
sharing.
The boards that I see that are most successful is where the management team and the board are proactive. I say this all the time, so I know people like Chris are sick of hearing it. When you have these problems, they're not like the flu. They're not just going to get better, right? I mean, they're only going to get worse. And so getting out in front of them and being proactive about handling it and doing it in a very organized manner, a very professional manner, um, is going to enhance the timing of the resolution. So anyway, are
Yeah,
there
well
other
said,
questions I can
Cass.
answer though?
Yeah, we did get a couple of questions in the chat
Okay.
and just wanted to say thank you on behalf of WRMC for presenting such relevant and obviously a breadth of information. And I know our communities appreciate your assistance as they're kind of navigating some of these claims. So for those in the audience, if you do have a question, please go ahead and submit it, but I'll start with the two that we've received to date. So the first one, when one or more engineering firms have significantly different opinions of the problem, what is the process? And I'll say that probably relates to origin and cost, Cass.
Right. Yeah, no, great question. And I think it's one of the things why you want to start out with having an organized and probably having counsel advise you through this. But if you start going out and going, well, let's bring this engineering firm in and see what they say. And let's bring this other engineering firm in and they have a different opinion. Trust me. I mean, if you went to 5 different lawyers, you'd get 5 different opinions. So what you want to do is you want to sit down before you go out and retain the engineering firm, and you want to talk about who they are, what their qualifications are, what their experience is. A lot of times we are the ones that bring the engineering firms to the table, if not all the time, and doing that based on our history with them and our knowledge of them. So hopefully that kind of thwarts that problem. Now, that being said, if you have differing opinions, you're going to have to decide which horse you're going to go to the party with, right? So bringing them in, having independent counsel there to listen to what they're saying and how they're saying it, and then you kind of pick one and go with it. The thing that will hurt your claim the most is having dysfunction, not continuity. You want to present a very organized, continuous claim. And so if you have that situation, you definitely don't want to take both of them to the builder. You want to sit down with them, figure out which one you are really think, put the time and effort into it, whose opinion makes the most sense, get some outside help if you need it, but then decide which person you're going to go to the party with and stay with them.
And what about, opposing counsel and their experts? What's the process for navigating those rebuttal reports?
Yeah, so when we get responsive reports from opposing counsel, then obviously those are going to go back to our experts. They're going to evaluate them, tell us what they think. We'll sit down with the board, we'll discuss the differing opinions, and that really draws the lines in the sand, right? I mean, here's what our experts say, here's what they think. There may be strengths or weaknesses with our position, and then here's what they say. And here's the strengths and weaknesses with their position. A lot of times the truth may be in the middle. It may not, or maybe be on closer to one side or the other, but you want to be able to evaluate those. So the process in the pre-litigation is you typically don't get expert reports. Rarely you do. In one of your cases, we actually did and never resolved the case without ever going to litigation. But a lot of times we'll send our expert reports over, and then all we'll get is, I'm not fixing that, or, here's not an expert opinion, but here's what I'm willing to offer you. And there's really no basis for it. But once you get into the case, then things become more structured. And then they have to produce expert reports. You will see those expert reports and you'll be able to evaluate them. Should I settle this case for this amount, or should I push it and go to arbitration or court based on the strength or weaknesses of the various positions? So anyway, it kind of varies at where it kind of depends on what point in the process the expert reports come across.
Got it. Great response. Thanks for that. And then the last question I'm seeing is, what if the builder has ceased all operations and either A, went bankrupt, or B, rebranded? Is there a workaround for that?
Yes, maybe. That's the first thing they teach you to say in law school. Maybe. So, you know, it's always nice to buy something from a D.R. Horton of the world, right? But especially with a lot of these vertical construction projects, it's not really typical builders who the developers. They're investor groups. And so they set up these single purpose LLCs, and they're not holding on to any cash. I mean, they're not D.R. Horton. They don't have a bunch of money. The good news is this, especially in the big vertical construction projects, is the builder will hire what is typically a very competent general contractor. Now, I say competent in the fact that they're big, they've been around for a long time, the Balfour Beatties of the world, the Whiteses of the world, what have you. So they have a lot of money, and you have direct claims against them as well. But really, the trend right now is OSIP, CSIP policies. So they don't have individual insurance policies. They go out and buy one $50 million policy that represents everybody, the builder, the general contractor, the subcontractors. And we're seeing that pretty much traditionally across the board. It's one insurance policy. So even if the developer investor group who developed the building is really not in business, there was single use LLC entity, or even if they went out of business, there's still plenty of avenues of recourse against general contractors. And then getting to the insurance is the key. I mean, that's really where you're going to end up anyway. And so it's almost impossible to build these buildings without insurance, because lenders are going to want that insurance to protect. So typically the insurance policy is there anyway. So even if you have a kind of what you consider fly by night, investor group, that doesn't necessarily thwart your recoverability of the case. That's something that we obviously will look at very quickly up front. My firm, real quickly, works a different model than most law firms. We fund the litigation. We pay for all the costs. My fees are contingent on recovery, so there's really no financial outlay to the HOA. So recoverability is something that we dig into really quickly. So anyway, it's not the best situation, but it's not a situation that should really stop you or slow you down.
Great clarification. Thanks for that, Cass.
Yeah.
I believe we're coming up on time, and I don't see any other questions. So I guess, Nicole, we'll hand it back over to you to bring it home for us.
Excellent. Thank you again, Cass, for presenting. That was wonderful information. So thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder, once the video has been uploaded to our WRMC YouTube channel, we will send the link out for you to access this webinar along with any other previous webinars that were in the speaker series. So thank you, everyone, again for joining us, and we hope that you have a wonderful evening. Thanks again. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you guys
Thanks,
for having
Chris.
us. Really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody takes care.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.